Golden sunlight floods the busy city as a packed train carries countless exhausted commuters home. Among the crowd, a weary salaryman sighs under the heavy weight of another brutal workday. Chaos erupts at the next station as aggressive crowds push and shove to exit the train. Irritation flashes across his face until his sharp eyes lock onto a sudden stroke of luck. A single open seat appears and he claims his prize, sinking into pure temporary bliss. This is Hyun Min-oh, a 33-year-old elite manager destined for the absolute top of the corporate ladder. Whenever critical company projects hit a wall, the executives always rely on his genius to save the day. Known as the ultimate corporate miracle worker, Hyun Min always delivers flawless results no matter the personal cost. But 3 straight months of relentless overtime finally take their toll as his heavy eyelids slip shut on the train. A sudden jolt of confusion snaps him awake, only to reveal an unfamiliar sky instead of the familiar subway car. Towering stone cliffs surround him as he finds himself sitting atop a massive spike throne in a cold cavern. A wild roar echoes through the dark chamber as dozens of green creatures cheer for their new leader. In utter disbelief, the exhausted manager struggles to make sense of the bizarre spectacle before him. The ecstatic monsters dance and celebrate around the platform, leaving the elite salaryman completely speechless. Clutching his head in pure panic, Hyun Min wonders if months of overtime finally killed him or broke his mind. Green creatures swarm the stone stairs of his massive platform as their frantic cheering echoes through the cavern. Beads of cold sweat run down his face as the silent manager struggles to process this bizarre reality. Studying their long pointed ears and emerald skin, he instantly recognizes them as fantasy goblins from games and anime. Shock paralyzes him when the monsters begin weeping with joy and praising their new lord in perfect fluent Korean. Tiny footsteps suddenly break the tension as a small figure rushes up the stone steps toward the grand throne. A baby goblin with massive innocent eyes stands before him holding a tiny round fruit as an offering. Baby goblin eagerly offers the strange fruit to its newly crowned master. Hyun Min cautiously accepts the strange bumpy produce, having never seen such a bizarre plant back on Earth. A mysterious rhythmic pulse beats under the orange skin, sending a wave of hesitation through the manager. Hundreds of glittering eyes stare back at him as the crowd silently begs their lord to accept the humble gift. Realizing his last meal was a cheap convenience store kimbap, the hungry salaryman stares at his strange prize. Stealing his resolve, the desperate manager takes a massive bite out of the pulsing fruit. Time stands completely still as the anxious tribe waits in absolute silence for their master to react. Pure culinary bliss washes over his face as he realizes this is the most delicious thing he has ever tasted. Deafening cheers shake the entire cavern as the emotional monsters celebrate their leader's first official meal. The thunderous cheering of his new subjects fades as a sudden wave of intense pressure grips his chest. Dizziness overcomes the elite manager as he collapses onto the cold stone floor before the small baby goblin. A glowing blue status screen suddenly materializes before his eyes, revealing his name and a looming war countdown. Utter disbelief fills his mind as the digital timer ticks away, threatening an upcoming conflict in 4 days. Confused by the strange terminology, he triggers a mechanical voice that speaks directly inside his head. The system reveals that a territory war requires mobilizing everything to protect the tribe from total destruction. Realizing the wiki tool answered his thoughts, he quickly rejects the overwhelming historical lore to focus on survival. Hyun Min sprawls on the cold stone floor, trying to comprehend his sudden displacement from the modern subway. The mysterious system terminal responds with a warning about this dangerous new domain called the Demon Realm. Pure horror washes over the elite manager as the terrifying name of this hostile fantasy world sinks in. Surrounded by cold silence, the frustrated salaryman demands a more detailed explanation from his mechanical guide. A blunt system error message immediately shuts down his hopes for any quick information. Infuriated by the useless guide, he desperately demands a way back to his comfortable corporate life. Denied once again by the restricted system, the exhausted manager collapses onto his spike throne in absolute despair. Pinching his own cheek delivers a harsh dose of reality, confirming this fantasy nightmare is completely real. Taking a deep breath, the adaptable businessman steels his resolve to accept his chaotic new circumstances. The weary manager realizes the system expects him to lead a full-scale war and receives a blunt confirmation. His eyes scan the crowd only to find a pathetic army of weak and fragile goblins waiting for orders. Their bony chests and hollow faces reveal extreme malnutrition, making them completely useless in any real battle. Desperation drives the manager to scream at his useless guide for any possible way to survive this nightmare. A terrifying red system alert warns that losing the war means a nearly 99% chance of death. Bitter laughter escapes his lips as he realizes both the real world and this fantasy realm are equally unfair. This impossible scenario feels exactly like his past corporate life of zero budget, zero manpower, and zero time. Memories of endless corporate slavery flash before his eyes as he recalls the grueling nights at his office desk. Risking his life for a job was already his everyday reality back on Earth. Sitting on his spiked throne, he asks the system guide if winning this war can finally send him back home. A glowing prompt confirms that returning to his world is indeed possible. He cuts off the system warning about low survival rates with absolute resolve. Stepping down from his frozen throne, the elite manager prepares to face the impossible task ahead. A massive crowd of weak goblins watches as their new lord stands before them under the ticking 4-day deadline. His shoes hit the cold stone floor as he gazes at his pathetic new army with a sharp, calculating mind. The tiny baby goblin looks up at him with pure innocence, hoping for a miracle from their new leader. Standing tall before his green subjects, he resolves to use his corporate genius to conquer this deadly fantasy war. Adjusting his tie with professional grace, he flashes his signature chilling grin to announce mandatory company overtime. Under the dark sky, the tactical leader carefully inspects the natural defense bottleneck of the narrow valley. A brilliant spark of genius flashes in his eyes as he poses a crucial battle question to his clueless new team. The annoying system tries to mock him only to get immediately silenced by the irritated manager. Facepalming at their absolute ignorance, he demands his green workers focus up for a crash course in basic strategy. Gesturing broadly to the steep cliffs, he orders his tiny squad to defend this narrow corridor with their very lives. Rolling up his pristine sleeves, he immediately delegates the first grueling task to 10 extremely confused goblins. Pointing directly at the high rocky ridges, he orders them to harvest sturdy timber that matches his exact height. The clever commander roars at his sluggish workers, sending them scrambling in absolute panic. Watching them flee, he realizes these simple-minded creatures require the exact same training as raw military recruits. He assigns the next 15 goblins to carry heavy boulders up to the highest ridges. Without hesitation, the agile monsters scale the sheer stone walls to execute their master plan. Next, he rallies the remaining forces to construct a devastating trap near the valley entrance. Lacking any proper tools, the desperate leader rolls up his sleeves and digs into the rough dirt with his bare hands. Under the eerie glow of 2 crescent moons, the grueling labor continues late into the quiet night. Massive boulders now line the cliff edge, ready to rain down destruction upon any approaching enemies. A deadly wall of sharpened wooden spikes stands completed inside the dark trench. This deep defensive pit stretches across the entire choke point, creating an impossible obstacle. Leaning on his weapon, the weary manager praises his bruised and muddy team for surviving this brutal shift. A sudden system notification reveals the legendary corporate trait of overtime has finally been unlocked. Gathering his exhausted workers, the ruthless manager announces that their true trial begins tonight. He asks the trembling creatures if they understand the true essence of working late hours. Under the eerie light of twin moons, he declares that every drop of sweat shed now saves their lives tomorrow. Raising his weapon high, the bold commander orders his army to unleash a mighty battle cry. The loyal goblins raise their fists and scream the holy word of overtime into the dark skies. Satisfied with their spirit, he instructs the green horde to immediately gather all available weapons. His high expectations quickly shatter as the clumsy monsters trip and stumble over their own feet. Inspecting their pathetic inventory reveals only crude stones, rusty daggers, and blunt tools. Looking at their pathetic rust-covered daggers, the manager realizes both sides suffer from terrible equipment. With individual combat power completely matched, the manager knows that strategy will ultimately decide this battle. He recalls his favorite corporate chairman who always praised ancient military books for business success. The timeless secret of infantry warfare is simple close formation coordination and synchronized thrusts. He orders his tiny green squad to stand in a straight line only to trigger instant chaos and confusion. Taking matters into his own hands, the patient leader physically positions each weak soldier side by side. He commands them to maintain a tight spacing and feel the elbows of their comrades to stay locked. Grabbing a crude wooden shaft, the modern manager demonstrates how to hold and thrust a spear in unison. His booming command to advance is immediately ruined when a clumsy recruit trips and faceplants onto the stone floor. A trembling goblin whimpers on the dirt only to face his master cold demand to stand right back up. With unyielding authority, the elite manager commands his pathetic troops to reform their broken ranks once more. Believing that endless repetition always crushes raw talent, the relentless boss orders another grueling advance. Under the cold night sky, his booming commands echo through the canyon in a relentless cycle of hard labor. Shaking hands and heavy breathing reveal that the weak monsters are finally reaching their absolute limits. Their exhausted faces remind him of broken corporate rookies, but stopping now means certain death for the entire tribe. Locking his gaze, the determined manager refuses to let them break as he barks out another fierce order to continue. The word again rings out like a ceaseless curse, forcing the sweat-soaked goblins to push past their physical boundaries. As the twin moons fade into dawn, the exhausted army continues to thrust their crude spears through sheer willpower. Trembling legs buckle under the crushing weight of the brutal training routine. The ruthless manager demands absolute perfection, promising 10 extra reps for every single mistake. A tiny voice suddenly interrupts his harsh commands as the small baby goblin steps forward. Looking down, the leader asks what he wants, only to hear a heartbreaking plea to sacrifice the young as food. Pure shock freezes the tactical genius as the terrifying reality of their past survival methods sinks in. This innocent child explains how offering 3 of their young to the enemy has always bought them peace. Softly grasping his finger, the brave baby selflessly offers his own life to save his new master. With a bittersweet smile, the child stands ready to embrace a tragic fate for the sake of the tribe. Silent shame hangs heavy over the older goblins, who stand powerless to protect their own children. An intense darkness falls over the manager's face as a fierce protective rage begins to boil deep within his soul. Gritting his teeth in pure disgust, the furious boss lets out a cold sigh of absolute disbelief. He asks the adult monsters if they are truly happy surviving on the sacrifices of their own children. The tactical leader warns them that giving up their people piece by piece will eventually leave them with nothing. Unleashing a thunderous roar, he declares that they will fight the enemy with everything they have. He vows to protect every single child and refuse to yield even a single grain of sand to the invaders. Fired up by his words, the unified goblin army screams to the heavens in a surge of newfound courage. The system countdown quickly reaches 0 and officially signals the start of the territory war. A heavy muddy foot stomps down violently as the incoming threat enters their domain. The savage and bloodthirsty goblins of Black Hill charge into the area with glowing yellow eyes. Standing firm at the valley bottleneck, the manager and his squad prepare to defend their position. With a sharp command, his trained green workers lower their heavy spears in perfect synchronization. The thunderous rumble of approaching footsteps echoes through the canyon as the fearless leader stands his ground. A bloodthirsty horde of invading beasts charges forward into a lethal trap designed by a chilling modern mind. High above the narrow passage, heavy boulders rest silently while the defensive phalanx blocks the path below. Shrill battle cries pierce the air as the defensive squad trembles under the weight of the massive incoming charge. His booming voice commands his soldiers to hold the line and stay focused until the enemy crosses the vital marker. The tactical genius counts down the final seconds as the charging enemies rush blindly toward their own doom. Sudden panic freezes the lead invaders as they realize too late that a massive trench blocks their advance. Relentless forward momentum betrays the invading monsters, pushing their own front lines directly into the deep abyss. Observing the complete chaos of the enemy forces, the cold manager knows their victory is already guaranteed. Hostile monsters tumble hopelessly into the deep trench as the ruthless leader watches with a dark, mocking grin. Blunder after blunder turns the enemy charge into a pathetic pile of thrashing limbs and desperate screams. The brilliant strategist silently calculates the exact moment when retreat becomes physically impossible for the invaders. Flashing a terrifying grin, he prepares to make the foolish invaders regret ever setting foot on his territory. With a thunderous roar that echoes through the canyon, the elite leader unleashes his devastating trap. Massive boulders rain down from the high cliffs as the trained cliffside squad hurls heavy stone down on the enemy. Earth-shattering impacts crush the front lines of the helpless invaders trapped inside the narrow rocky bottleneck. The tireless green workers continue to hurl a relentless barrage of heavy stones down the steep cliffs. Screaming in absolute agony, the invading forces watch their comrades get crushed under the brutal stone onslaught. Total panic consumes the enemy ranks as they desperately trample one another to escape the falling debris. Looking down, the clever manager notes that the deep trench completely cuts off any hope of their retreat. Desperate to survive, the battered survivors charge forward with zero regard for their failing strength. Flashing a cold smile, the confident leader declares that sheer numbers hold no value on this battlefield. He commands his newly trained squad to raise their heavy wooden spears and stand completely unified. With a booming roar, the fearless commander orders his front line to execute their synchronized advance. Sharp wooden points pierce cleanly through enemy armor as the green soldiers strike together in unison. Clutching his blood-stained weapon, a trembling goblin realizes the incredible power of their tireless training. The manager screams commands to pull back and thrust again, keeping his troops highly focused. A trained soldier cleanly skewers another invading beast with his crude wooden spear. He demands his squad match the exact pace of their comrades and leave no openings. On his command, the spear wall advances and delivers another devastating synchronized strike. The relentless march forward continues as they drive their spears deeper into the enemy lines. Overwhelmed by the coordinated assault, the surviving invaders begin to hesitate and step backward. Shock and absolute terror spread through the hostile ranks as their formation completely collapses. Helpless monsters stumble backward and pile onto one another in a chaotic frenzy of fear. Looking down the narrow canyon reveals the utter devastation of the invading army forces. A satisfied smirk grows on the manager's face as his master strategy unfolds perfectly. By combining crushing boulders from above with a solid wall of spears, they have successfully turned the tide. The intense overnight training of blood and sweat is finally paying off on the battlefield. Just when victory seems assured, a sudden heavy vibration echoes through the canyon walls. A colossal figure steps onto the battlefield, casting a massive shadow over the terrified soldiers. This massive beast steps forward and looks down upon the entire army with absolute contempt. He exhales a heavy breath before unleashing a thunderous roar that shakes the canyon walls. The terrifying monster screams his defiance directly at the human leader. Lowering his massive body, he leaps high into the air like a crashing meteor. His heavy landing shatters the stone floor as he looms over the entire defensive line. The system reveals this towering beast is none other than the mighty hobgoblin lord of the Black Hill. Our unfazed manager calmly mocks the beast with a savage insult about his terrible breath. The furious monster swings his giant club to silence the insolent human. He points a massive finger and demands a deadly one-on-one duel to decide the fate of this territory. The unexpected proposal for a duel leaves the tactical leader completely stunned for a brief moment. He points to himself in disbelief, wondering if this monstrous giant truly expects a simple one-on-one duel. Letting out a wicked laugh, the towering beast mocks the human for showing signs of hesitation. With supreme confidence, the manager simply waves off the threat as if it were a minor inconvenience. A massive bone club tears through the air as the furious lord prepares to obliterate his tiny opponent. The arrogant monster laughs at the manager, declaring his absolute weakness to the entire battlefield. Disappointed by the lack of resistance, the ruthless beast raises his weapon to deliver a swift final blow. An enormous boulder suddenly drops from the sky and violently smashes directly onto the giant head of the lord. Grabbing his bleeding forehead, the enraged beast screams in fury over this shameless interruption of their duel. A relentless storm of heavy stones rains down from above, completely sealing the fate of the trapped monster. Earth-shattering impacts repeatedly crush his body until the mighty ruler is entirely buried under the heavy rubble. Looking down at the defeated titan, the pragmatic manager proudly declares that absolute victory is all that matters. The manager smugly dismisses the challenge just as the system officially declares their absolute victory. Smiling triumphantly, he raises his weapon to celebrate the hard-fought victory with his loyal army. Amidst the fallen invaders, the victorious green workers raise their fists and unleash a thunderous cheer of pure joy. On the blood-stained battlefield, a wounded survivor twitches and struggles to push himself off the ground. Instantly, a sharp spear point stops inches from his face as the green soldiers prepare to finish him off. Halting the execution, the startled human manager steps forward and commands his troops to stand down. Confused by his sudden order, the green soldiers lower their weapons and stare back at their leader in silence. Looking down at the trembling survivor, the thoughtful strategist demands to know why they want to end the defenseless life. An anxious soldier protests that sparing the enemy only invites another brutal attack in the future. Stepping forward, the resolute human leader instantly shuts down their demand for immediate execution. He explains that a dead enemy is nothing more than a useless corpse rotting on the ground. Keeping the survivors alive turns them into a highly valuable resource for their growing community. High above the rocky canyon, the mastermind overlooks his newly organized forces from a grand stone platform. Activating his system interface, the clever strategist decides to carefully calculate their total war spoils. A bright holographic notification confirms that their territory has officially leveled up with over 200 new residents. The system lists their newly acquired basic supplies consisting of dried meat, fruit, and old leather pieces. Expanded privileges reveal that their current location is situated deep within the 12th floor of the demon realm. Descending the stone steps, the calculating manager realizes the extreme difficulties of managing such a massive crowd. He deeply worries about a looming famine as their current food supplies are far too low to sustain so many mouths. A sudden system alert cruelly shuts down his hope by stating that normal agriculture is completely impossible here. Stopping in his tracks, a brilliant spark of curiosity flashes in the manager's eyes as he looks down at the ground. He picks up a strange spiky orange fruit, wondering how these plants manage to grow in such a barren wasteland. Holding up the fruit, the manager demands to know its origin from the captured goblins. Threatened with a spot on the torture list, the terrified prisoners quickly confess they stole it from a nearby forest. Silencing their loud cries, the calculating leader turns his attention to his own loyal troops to formulate a plan. He calls forward 3 brave soldiers who immediately step up and salute their commander with absolute loyalty. The leader orders his newly appointed scouts to head out and investigate the mysterious forest before sunrise. A sudden wave of intense panic washes over the captive goblins as they hear about the impending scouting mission. They warn the manager that a terrifying entity guards the woods, making sure that no intruder ever returns alive. Unfazed by the warnings, the bold leader takes a bite of the sweet fruit and decides to proceed with the mission. Watching his casual reaction, the trembling goblin desperately hopes he is officially off the torture list for good. Angry soldiers scream for immediate execution, claiming the captives are nothing but evil bullies. Confronting his emotional troops, the human manager commands silence with a single cold look. He demands they tell him the actual reason behind their recent battlefield success. The strategist challenges their pride by asking if they truly believe their combat skills won the day. He completely humbles his shocked army by declaring that sheer luck was the only thing that saved them. Tossing the spiky orange fruit into the air, he casually dismisses the idea of wasting valuable time on torture. Snatching the fruit from the air, he warns them that preparation is the only true key to survival. Far from safety, a dark, mysterious forest glows eerily under the pale moonlight. 3 chosen scouts slip through the dense shadows with their crude wooden weapons held tight. An oversized alien insect suddenly lands on a bare foot, making the scout instantly freeze in terror. Panic consumes the young green soldier as he desperately struggles to hold back a loud scream. His alert comrade quickly lunges forward to muzzle his mouth before their position is exposed. They vividly recall the strict command of their leader to observe and touch absolutely nothing. Crawling low to the damp earth, they carefully navigate the treacherous woodland floor. Another sharp warning strike keeps them perfectly silent as they slide deeper into the unknown. The scout points through the darkness toward a cluster of hanging pink fruits. A sudden chill runs down his spine as he notices thin glowing silk threads connected to the branches. Instantly, a comrade clamps his hand shut to block a terrified scream from echoing through the woods. Looking up, they realize the entire tree is tightly wrapped in a massive glowing web of deadly spider silk. Cold sweat drips down his face as the sheer danger of their situation becomes horrifyingly clear. Crawling forward, the lead scout spots a strange black puddle and reaches down to investigate the mysterious fluid. Thick dark slime drips from his fingers as he realizes this is the fresh blood of a slaughtered creature. Sensing an immediate threat, he urgently signals his team to turn back and retreat with absolute silence. Before they can take another step, a bizarre choking sound above them freezes the entire squad in pure terror. A glowing thread of deadly silk suddenly wraps around the frozen scout. A drop of mysterious dark liquid falls from the canopy above directly onto his skin. The corrosive slime burns his flesh as he desperately tries to wipe it away. Looking down at his hand, he gasps in horror at the dark blood staining his fingers. The other scouts watch in silence as their comrade freezes under the shadow of a silent predator. Realizing they are completely outmatched, the lead scout screams for everyone to run. Meanwhile, back at the camp, the clever manager gathers his new subordinates to map out the territory. He questions the captive goblins to confirm if a massive desert lies just beyond the forest boundary. The primitive creatures tilt their heads in absolute confusion at the strange word. He simplifies his question by asking if there is a massive land nearby made entirely of sand. The exhausting interrogation leaves the manager rubbing his temples in deep frustration. A crude map begins to take shape, revealing the layout of the 12th floor of the demon realm. Despite the slow progress, the strategist remains confident that this layout is more than enough to plan his next move. Panicked screams echo through the camp as two terrified scouts collapse directly in front of their surprised manager. The breathless survivors reveal that their missing comrade was suddenly snatched and dragged into the dark canopy. Recalling his strict orders, the strategist notices a strange glowing residue and pulls it from the soldier's shoulder. Examining the sticky fiber, he immediately tries to identify the bizarre material clinging to his hand. Silence falls over the entire crowd as the calculating leader stands motionless to process this grim news. He pieces together the clues of wrapped trees, puncture marks on the ground, and highly toxic webbing. Realizing the massive danger, he envisions giant predatory spiders wiping out his entire army in seconds. Facing a potentially catastrophic defeat, the manager releases a heavy sigh of sheer frustration. Refusing to take the easy way out, he casually sheds his suit jacket and prepares for a difficult battle. Turning to his anxious troops, the determined strategist commands everyone to pack their belongings and get ready. Throwing his jacket over his shoulder, the bold leader declares they are heading straight into the dangerous woods. Eerie whispers echo through the misty canopy of the dark forest, where danger lurks in every shadow. Suddenly, razor-sharp arachnid legs clamp down on the green soldier's arm with a sickening grip. Glowing golden eyes look down as the monstrous predator traps its helpless prey in its massive jaws. The giant 8-legged nightmare emerges from the shadows, ready to hunt anything that dares enter its domain.